Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Following the US-Russia peace meeting in Saudi Arabia, US President Donald Trump says Ukraine could have made a deal with Russia to end the war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has delayed his visit to Saudi Arabia until the 10th of March after saying it was a surprise his country wasn't invited to the talks. Hamas has proposed releasing all dead and alive hostages in exchange for an end to the war with Israel, as the group indicates it is ready for talks on stage 2 of the ceasefire deal. 6 living and the bodies of 4 hostages, including 2 children, could be freed in return for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. The bodies of 23 people have been discovered by Lebanese civil defense forces after the withdrawal of Israeli troops. IDF soldiers have remained in 5 outposts in southern Lebanon, close to the border with Israel. A judge has ruled that Elon Musk's DOGE can continue accessing US federal government data as it looks at cutting spending. Trump and Musk held a joint interview stating they plan to restore the will of the people. First, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense has said that 20 Chinese military aircraft were detected near its territory on Wednesday. Out of those, 15 crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait and entered the northern, central and southwestern air defense identification zone to conduct air-sea joint training along with other Navy vessels. In recent weeks, China has increased its capacity to conduct amphibious assaults on Taiwan's beaches with new naval equipment. The Taiwan-China conflict remained a long-standing geopolitical issue centered on Taiwan's sovereignty. Meanwhile, footage released by the Philippines Coast Guard shows a Chinese naval helicopter flying close to a Philippines aircraft patrolling over a disputed area of the South China Sea. According to the Coast Guard, the helicopter flew within 3 meters of the Philippines plane, prompting the pilots to say, "You are flying too close, you are very dangerous," over the radio. The Philippines government said it would file a formal protest over the incident. Joining us first to discuss the continuation and this evolving topic in Taiwan and China is Ross Feingold, who is a political risk analyst joining us from Taipei, Taiwan. Ross, thank you very much for your time and for joining us. Is there any difference between the breaches of Taiwanese airspace that we're seeing within the last 24 hours compared to other times, and why are these continuing, in your opinion?
Not really. We've seen this many times before, frequently, and China will fly its aircraft or sail its ships within Taiwan's airspace or waters, and they do so quite frequently. And sometimes it's in response to something the Taiwan government does that China dislikes, such as welcome a high-profile American guest, or when Taiwan's leader transits the United States. And other times it's just simply to test the ability of the Taiwan military, the Air Force, the Navy, to respond. And the important thing to keep in mind when China does this is it puts enormous pressure, and I really can't emphasize that enough. It puts enormous pressure on the Taiwan military to respond because they have to fly their own planes and set their own ships out to sea to respond and make a show of force to the Chinese side. And this puts a big strain on the personnel in Taiwan. It puts a big strain on the equipment, and it puts a big strain on the budget. And it's a huge amount of pressure that China is able to put on Taiwan with these types of military exercises that occur so frequently. China has a much larger military. They have a far larger number of aircraft, a far larger number of ships, and they have a far larger budget. And they could put this pressure on Taiwan whenever they want to, and it puts the Taiwan military in a very difficult position.
Yes, and looking at potential reasons why there has been this show of force. Within recent days, there have been reports that Taiwan is looking to secure a weapons deal with the US in order to potentially gain favour with Donald Trump. Do you think this is something that China's looking at as a threat? And do you think that relationship with the US and Taiwan is also a threat to China?
China knows that the United States is going to continue to sell weapons to Taiwan. There's absolutely nothing new in the United States doing that. In fact, there's a domestic US law that obligates the United States government to sell weapons to Taiwan to help Taiwan with its self-defense. Obviously, China doesn't like it, and they will respond as they see fit at their own discretion when they feel like it. And the recent incursions might be in response to the U.S. military, the potential for military weapon sales to Taiwan. It could be in response to the United States Department of State changing a website that described the relationship with Taiwan, and it was changed in a way that China frankly doesn't like. They've publicly opposed the change that the State Department under new Secretary of State Marco Rubio made to describe the bilateral Taiwan-U.S. relationship. So China has a number of reasons why they might respond this way. Whether or not it's in response to any particular reason or it's something that was long planned, only the Chinese military really knows the answer.
Yes, and joining us to also discuss this topic is Andrew K.P. Leung, who is an international and independent China strategist joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much. I'd like to explore that potential relationship between Taiwan, specifically now Donald Trump is in the White House. How much of a spanner can Donald Trump throw into the works in terms of China's goals and aims regarding Taiwan?
Well, of course, Trump is noted for his theatrics. This recent sudden removal of a statement from the U.S. government website could be one of them. And of course, the doubling down on selling arms to Taiwan is a continuation of the so-called porcupine policy of turning Taiwan into a military porcupine. But I think the game changer with Trump 2.0 is that his position on Taiwan has become more calibrated, more nuanced, compared definitely with the Biden administration. I mean, he has lapped on 100% tariffs on Taiwan's semiconductor industry and also asking Taiwan to pay for its own defense. But above all, I think that we're seeing a momentum there being created that Trump is trying to strike a grand bargain with American speakers competitors or rivals. Looks what's happening over Ukraine. I mean, it's striking a grand bargain with Putin. And he said he's going to visit Beijing within the first 100 days, suggesting that he may well also strike some sort of a bargain with Beijing. But of course, any bargain with Beijing necessarily involved the Taiwan situation. And not that the United States will give up Taiwan immediately, but then on the other hand, that also ties in with Beijing's priority for unification by peaceful means. Because you look at the two places, the people are increasingly interacting with one another, more tourists, more investment, more Taiwanese young people establishing their businesses on China. And even though the numbers have gone down in recent years, there are still something like 400,000 or 300, 400,000 Taiwanese living on the mainland together with their families, members working on their businesses. And all this, the momentum is being further given impetus by President Xi's encouragement of further interaction between the people-to-people exchanges. So I think that what we're seeing now is an apparent tension, but it hides the dynamics underneath. Think that Trump wants any war. He's likely to go down into history a peaceful president. He doesn't like war or want a war on Ukraine. And definitely he's winding down, rattling down the rhetoric, even in the Middle East. And last but not least, he wanted a war in the Asia Pacific. So I think that all these translates to something, a momentum towards recalibration of relationship between the United States and Beijing, of which Taiwan is a very important factor.
Yes, Andrew, very quickly before we do move on, is this situation between the Chinese plane and the Philippines plane just a coincidence and an error, or is there something else at play here?
Well, I think that the Philippines wants to be seen to defend its own sovereignty and also territory, even though territory is in dispute with Beijing. I think that this is a continuation of that, but I think in the scheme of things, It features not terribly significantly in Beijing's calculation, nor for matter Trump's calculation. Even though the president is encouraging closer cooperation, for example, with the hawk Australian, United States, and Australia on this submarine countermeasures against Beijing, and also promoting cooperation between South Korea and Japan. But I think that these are relatively not overriding considerations. The overriding consideration is Trump wants to have a grand bargain or gains to make America great again while maintaining peace.
Yes, Andrew, thank you very much for your time. Ross will be staying with us as we move on to a significant legal decision that has been made regarding Elon Musk and US President Donald Trump. A judge has denied a request to halt President Trump's push to reduce the size of the federal workforce. A district judge ruled against 14 states that sought a restraining order to stop the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency. Musk, the world's wealthiest person, spearheads DOGE, which has taken the lead role in carrying out the Republican president's plans for downsizing and overhauling the federal government. In her decision, the judge wrote that the states legitimately call into question what appears to be the unchecked authority of an unelected individual and an entity that was not created by Congress and over which it has no oversight. The lawsuit accused Musk's team of unlawfully accessing data at federal agencies and directing a purge of some of the country's 2.3 million federal workers. It was filed by more than a dozen states and announced by state attorneys general from New Mexico, Michigan and Arizona. Joining us to discuss this first, we do have Raja Manib, who is a foreign affairs expert in New Delhi. Thank you very much for being with us, Raja. This is a win for Trump, this is a win for Musk, and we of course saw them hold a joint interview afterwards. Do you think anything is going to stop them in their aims of really cutting out the dead wood that they see in the federal workforce?
Thank you. Yes, it's a significant win for Trump and his team. If you look at Donald Trump's statement yesterday, what he made about unelected bureaucrats being in charge of departments where they have no place to be at the first place, and then he appointing Elon Musk as a head of DOGE, and he's saying that it's being the president of being selected by a large electorate. If his what he wants to do in the United States, if it is not being followed through, that means they are, disrespecting the electorate itself, because president is taking decisions on behalf of the electorate. So I think that's a big win for Trump. And going forward, he would like to make it more easier, because, there has been a lot of hinting coming in from US as well, wherein we have seen judges who have gone against, Elon Musk, and kind of withholding him from giving certain information in the courts, and he has now started questioning the appointment of the judges. So I think there will be a lot in America who would be actually thinking on how they want to protect themselves vis-a-vis when it comes to their job, because we have seen this amount, this massive amount of firings happening across departments in US, and as the DOGE investigation is revealing itself, we are finding more and more stuff which is actually shocking in geopolitical terms as well. Some of the funding is absolutely shocking, the way it has been, the taxpayers' money has been funded to further the cause of American deep state, or I should not be using the word deep state, but, American geopolitical health state in other parts of the world. So, yes, it's a win for Trump.
Ross, thank you for sticking with us. I want to look at the accusations that have been made by the Democratic State Attorneys General. Is there any legitimacy in what they're saying? Although Elon Musk, of course, wasn't voted in, Trump was. He has control over US politics and has the popular vote. So is this just the president enacting what he said he would do, and does everybody else have to let him do that?
Politically, it's President Trump following campaign promises. He basically said very clearly, in fact, that these are the things he would do if he did win the election last year. And now he's following through on campaign promises. I like to say that in a democracy, it's generally a good thing an elected leader follows through on his campaign promises. But ultimately, the ability of the Department of Government Efficiency or President Trump to do these things, it really turns on very complex issues of the United States Constitution and presidential authority. The Trump administration and the people that President Trump has chosen to staff up his administration, they believe in very expansive presidential authority over the executive branch, and they really reject the idea that government bureaucrats have more power or more say over what government agencies do compared to the president himself. This is in the courts, as you mentioned at the top of the segment. It will probably go to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has a very conservative majority, and it's highly likely they're going to uphold the president's authority to make these changes at agencies that are within the executive branch. And in fact, even some agencies that have been considered independent agencies, like the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Fair Trade Commission, the Supreme Court, with its conservative majority, is very likely to uphold President Trump's very wide ability to make decisions for those agencies.
Yes, Raja, coming back to you, the man in the middle of this picture is, of course, Elon Musk, and something that has been raised by the critics of DOGE is that conflict of interest. So is that something that you think is legitimate, given this person hasn't been voted by the Senate, he wasn't directly voted for by the people, and he is in a position where he has access to now, of course, lots and lots of information that isn't available to many of the world's richest men, unlike Elon Musk?
Joshua, I think it's more of a political witch hunt than an actual concern. Look, there are lots of bureaucrats in America, who are heading State Department and other places, which they have not been elected by the people, right? It's the president or the Senate or the Congress who goes through a dual process and then elects them. So I think going after Trump merely by saying he's not been elected by people is mere propaganda, is mere political witch hunting. Because at the end of the day, it's the United States president who he's reporting to. He's not somebody who has taken over the presidency of the United States and is behaving like, somebody who's unelected. He's basically answerable to the president of the United States, and the U.S. president is the one who has given him the authority to go and run this department. So I don't see why it should be a huge issue or there is a conflict of interest. I think it's more of a political hunting, which the Democrats are subscribing to more than really a conflict of interest which can be established in that game.
Raja, Munib and Ross Feingold, we do have to move on, but thank you very much for your insights. Obviously, the debate over DOGE isn't going anywhere, and we will be here to continue all of those discussions. Now, Hamas has announced the release of 6 Israeli hostages on Saturday, including 2 long-held captives, Avira Mengistu and Hisham al-Sayed. The release is part of the ongoing ceasefire deal. The bodies of 4 hostages will also be handed over to Israel, potentially on Thursday. This marks a significant step as negotiations continue towards the second phase of the ceasefire deal.
According to militant group leader Khalil al-Hayya, Hamas announced the handover of the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages with 6 living captives set for release on Saturday.
فقد قررت الحركة والمقاومة ما يلي. أولاً تسليم عدد 4 من جثامين أسرى الاحتلال يوم الخميس 20 فبراير الجاري، على أن يفرج العدو يوم السبت القادم 22 فبراير عمن يقابلهم من أسرانا حسب الاتفاق. ثانياً الإفراج يوم السبت المقبل 22 من فبراير الجاري عمن تبقى من أسرى الاحتلال الأحياء المتفق على إطلاق سراحهم في المرحلة الأولى، وعددهم 6 على أن يفرج العدو عمن يقابلهم من أسرانا حسب الاتفاق.
Initially, only 3 hostages were expected to be freed, but Hamas has not provided an explanation for this change in plans. Under the first phase of the ceasefire deal, 33 hostages were set to be released, and so far, 19 have been freed, while Israel has confirmed 8 hostages are dead. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed the upcoming release of the 6 living hostages, marking the final hostages to be freed under this phase of the agreement. The 6 hostages being released on Saturday include 2 Israelis, Avira Mengistu and Hisham al-Sayed, who have been held by Hamas for over a decade. Hamas also stated that 4 bodies, including members of the Bibas family, will be handed over on Thursday. with deep concerns from Israel over their condition. The first phase of the ceasefire, which has paused deadly fighting and allowed aid to flow into Gaza, sets the stage for the more challenging second phase, where further negotiations will occur. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now head back to North America for more of the latest updates there. In a significant legal decision, a US judge has denied a request to halt President Trump's push to reduce the size of the federal workforce. A district judge ruled against 14 states that sought a restraining order to stop the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk. The decisions of DOGE have created some controversy. The states have argued that DOGE lacked the authority to fire federal workers or access sensitive data. US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order increasing access to IVF. The order gives his advisors 90 days to protect IVF access and reduce insurance costs. Speaking to press, the president reiterated his stance on the importance of family formation. The order risks backlash from the conservative right. Rapper A$AP Rocky has been found not guilty on 2 counts of felony assault. Rocky was charged with shooting a semi-automatic weapon during a confrontation in 2021. This conclusion came out of his trial, which took place in Los Angeles. The rapper could have faced more than 2 decades in prison had he been found guilty. The CIA has reportedly launched special drones over Mexico. The covert operations using MQ-19 drones will spy on drug cartels in Mexico and may be used for armed operations. They can also be fitted with payloads to carry out specific attacks. Such drones are frequently employed by the US to target alleged terrorists in the Middle East and Africa. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joy has supposedly warned European leaders of President Trump. This comes as she concluded her recent European tour. Coming back to Canada, the minister stated that she provided a wake-up call to EU leaders about the economic and political threat posed by Trump. Joly also stated that the reason Europe has not strongly spoken against Trump is because they have issues of their own. In updates from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi are pulling out their forces following the fall of Bukavu. These soldiers have been fighting the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels. Meanwhile, the rebels appear to be heading towards a third major city in eastern Congo. Let's take a look in these reports.
Burundi is withdrawing its forces from the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where they had been fighting against M23 rebels in a further blow to Congo's army as it struggles to halt a rebel advance. A Burundian military spokesman called the ongoing pullout fake and said that his country's soldiers were continuing to execute their missions in their areas of responsibility in Congo. A Burundian army officer confirmed movements which were also described by UN sources and an African diplomat saying that several trucks filled with Burundian military arrived in the country.
We are expressing grave concern, that is what our leaders did, on the situation in Eastern DRC, calling for immediate withdrawal of M23 and their supporters from all occupied towns and cities, including Goma Airport.
Burundian soldiers fought alongside the Congolese to try to defend Kavumu, home to the airport that services Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu province, which fell over the weekend. It was their most significant prize since they seized Goma, the biggest city in eastern Congo, in late January. The pullout came after the United Nations Human Rights Office accused M23 rebels of executing children in eastern Congo during their advance.
The Rwanda-backed M23 advance to South Kivu has plunged the region into a complex security and humanitarian crisis, provoking population displacement. Our office has confirmed cases of summary execution of children by M23 after they entered the city of Bukavu last week. We're also aware that children were in possession of weapons.
Meanwhile, frightened residents are saying that Rwanda-backed rebels appear to be heading toward a third major city in eastern Congo. Burundi has had soldiers in eastern Congo for years, initially to hunt down Burundian rebels there, but more recently to aid in the fight against M23. A local official and an army colonel have said that fighting between rebels and the Congolese army also took place on Tuesday in Lubero territory, north of Goma. Congo President Felix Tshisekedi met his Angolan counterpart João Lourenço in Luanda, the Angolan capital, to discuss the accelerated deterioration of the security situation in eastern Congo. Bureau Report, NewsX.
That is all we have time for, but we'll be back very soon with more of your latest world news.